The vast emptiness of the Kuiper Belt stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by the gleaming hulls of the massive alien fleet that now drifted helplessly through space. What had started as a routine passage through the solar system had turned into a nightmare for the 50,000 civilian passengers and crew members aboard the ships. Captain First Class Reed of the flagship watched through the main viewport as another warning light flashed across the control panel. The radiation from the recent solar flare had done more damage than anyone had expected. Their quantum drive systems, the pride of their civilization's engineering, had failed completely. "Status report," Reed commanded, his tall frame casting a shadow across the dimly lit bridge. "Not good, Captain," replied the chief engineer. "The radiation levels are still rising. Our shielding wasn't designed for this kind of solar activity. We're losing systems faster than we can repair them." Reed nodded grimly. Their fleet, with all its advanced technology, was being undone by something as simple as radiation. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Send the distress signal to the Galactic Council," he ordered. "We need immediate assistance." The message beamed out across space, carrying their plea for help to the highest authorities in known space. The response came faster than expected, but it wasn't the answer they had hoped for. The holographic image of Council Member Lane appeared in the center of the bridge. Her ethereal form flickered slightly as she spoke. "Captain Reed, we have received your distress call and analyzed your situation. I regret to inform you that we cannot send our rescue ships into your sector." "What?" Reed stepped forward, his voice tight with concern. "We have 50,000 civilians aboard these ships. We need help. The radiation levels in your area are beyond safe operating parameters for any of our species," Lane explained. "Even with our best shielding, we would lose too many lives attempting a rescue." The bridge fell silent. The thought of being abandoned here, slowly watching their systems fail one by one, was almost too much to bear. But then something unexpected happened. A junior council member stepped into view behind Lane. "There might be another option," he said hesitantly. Lane turned. "Explain." "Well," the junior member continued, "there's a species in that system, primitive by our standards, but they have some unique characteristics. They're called humans." "Humans?" Reed had heard of them. Everyone had. The newcomers to the galactic scene, barely out of their own solar system. What good could they do? The junior member pulled up a data screen. "Their biology is fascinating. They evolved on a planet with relatively high background radiation. Their cells have remarkable repair mechanisms. They've even built entire industries around handling radioactive materials. They might be able to survive the conditions that are killing our systems." Lane looked skeptical. "They're barely a Class II civilization. Their technology is centuries behind ours." "But they're close," the junior member insisted. "They're right here in this system. And more importantly, they might be able to work in these conditions." Reed watched the exchange with growing interest. He'd never met a human, but right now, any hope was better than none. Lane finally nodded. "Very well. I'm authorizing emergency contact with Earth's governments. Captain Reed, prepare your fleet for potential human assistance. Though I warn you, their methods may be unconventional by our standards." As the hologram faded, Reed turned to look out at his stranded fleet once more. Somewhere on that blue planet they could barely see from here, there might be beings capable of helping them. It seemed impossible that a species so new to space travel could succeed where the galaxy's finest had failed. But as another system failure alarm blared through the bridge, Reed knew they had no choice. They would have to put their fate in the hands of these radiation-resistant primitives. He just hoped the humans were as resourceful as the stories said they were. The fate of 50,000 lives now depended on it. The emergency meeting at NASA headquarters had been going for 3 hours. Maps, radiation readings, and alien ship schematics floated on screens around the room. Dr. James Wilson, head of NASA's Space Rescue Division, stood at the front of the room, pointing at the latest radiation measurements from the Kuiper Belt. These levels would kill their species in minutes, he explained to the assembled team. But for humans, with proper shielding, we could work in these conditions for several hours at a time. Several hours? Asked General Thompson from his seat at the back. Will that be enough time? Wilson nodded. We've run the calculations. With rotating teams and our latest radiation suits, we can do it. The real challenge will be adapting our technology to work with theirs. At the other end of the table, Tom Baker, the lead engineer chosen for the mission, studied the alien ship designs. Despite 20 years of working on space stations, he'd never seen anything like these vessels. They were beautiful, like crystal sculptures floating in space, but they looked fragile compared to human ships. Their technology is amazing, Tom said, zooming in on one of the engine sections. But they've made everything so delicate. No backup systems, no mechanical failsafes. Everything depends on their quantum fields working perfectly. Marcus Rivera, the radiation specialist sitting next to him, snorted. That's what happens when you've never had to worry about things breaking. They've had it too easy. Kate Anderson, the team's xenobiologist, spoke up from her station near the biological readings. The aliens aren't built like us. Their civilization developed in environments with almost no background radiation. They never needed to adapt to it like Earth life did. The room fell quiet as the main screen lit up with a new message. The alien captain's face appeared, his otherworldly features tight with concern. Have you reached a decision? Captain Reed asked. Our backup systems are failing faster than predicted. We have less than 2 weeks before life support begins to degrade. Wilson stepped forward. Yes, Captain. We can help. But you need to understand. Our methods will seem primitive to you. We'll need to modify your ships in ways your engineers might find concerning. Reed's expression was hard to read, but his voice carried a note of desperation. At this point, Captain Wilson, we'll accept any solution that saves our people. Then we'll begin immediately, Wilson replied. We're assembling 3 teams. Each will work 6-hour shifts with mandatory rest periods between. We'll need your engineers to cooperate with our people, even if our approaches seem strange to them. After the call ended, Wilson turned to the room. Tom, you'll lead the engineering team. Marcus, you'll handle radiation safety. Kate, you'll be our liaison with the alien medical staff. We launch in 24 hours. As the meeting broke up, Tom stayed behind, still studying the ship designs. He'd spent his life building things to work in the harshest conditions space could throw at them. Human ships weren't pretty. They were overbuilt, redundant, and could be repaired with basic tools if needed. These alien vessels were the opposite. They were technological marvels that worked perfectly until they didn't. And when they failed completely. Thinking about how to fix them, Marcus asked, pausing at the door. Tom nodded. We'll need to combine their technology with ours, something that can handle the radiation but still interface with their systems. It won't be elegant, but it'll work, Marcus finished. That's what humans do best. We make things work. As they left the room, the screen still glowed with images of the stranded fleet, 50,000 lives hanging in the balance, waiting for help from a species they'd considered primitive. But sometimes, Tom thought, being primitive had its advantages. Humans had learned to survive in conditions that would kill most alien species. They'd learned to build things that kept working even when everything went wrong. Now it was time to prove that humanity's primitive solutions could save the day. The human rescue ship approached the alien fleet slowly. Unlike the sleek, crystalline vessels ahead of them, the human ship looked like a working vessel. Bulky radiation shields bolted to its hull, thick layers of protective plating, and visible repair tools secured to its exterior. Tom Baker stood at the viewing window, watching as they drew closer to the massive flagship. They're requesting we dock at the main engineering port, the pilot announced. But they're warning us about radiation levels again. Marcus checked his radiation meter and grinned. Tell them we're fine. These levels are nothing compared to what we deal with in nuclear cleanup operations. The docking procedure took longer than expected. The alien system wasn't designed for such a crude vessel, as they politely called it. Finally, with some creative adjustments, they secured a solid seal. As the airlock cycled, Kate reviewed the alien atmospheric data one last time. Remember, they're not used to seeing beings walk around in radiation zones. Try not to frighten them. The inner door opened, revealing a group of alien engineers waiting nervously behind a protective shield. Their tall, elegant forms seemed to shrink back slightly as the humans walked forward in their bulky radiation suits. "Welcome aboard," Captain Reed said through the translation system. "Though I must warn you, you're entering an extremely dangerous environment. Our sensors indicate the radiation levels here are within acceptable parameters." Tom finished, checking his suit readouts. "We can work in these conditions for about 6 hours before we need to rotate shifts." The alien engineers exchanged looks of what might have been disbelief. One of them stepped forward, introducing himself as Chief Engineer Bright. "You truly can function in these conditions?" he asked. "Our best shielding technology cannot protect us for more than a few minutes." "Different evolutionary history," Kate explained. "Human cells can repair radiation damage to a degree that would be impossible for your species. That's why we're here to help." They moved toward the engine room, the aliens keeping a safe distance behind their portable shields. As they walked, Tom studied the ship's construction with growing amazement. Everything was integrated so perfectly it looked like it had grown rather than been built. But there were no visible access panels, no way to quickly replace damaged parts. "How do you usually repair these systems?" Tom asked, running his scanner over a power conduit. "Repair?" Bright seemed confused. "These systems are designed to function perfectly for the life of the ship. They self-maintain through quantum field manipulation, or at least they did until the radiation disrupted the fields." Marcus whistled inside his helmet. "No wonder you're stuck. You've got no way to fix anything manually." The alien engineer's expression shifted to something that might have been embarrassment. "We never considered it necessary. Our technology has always worked perfectly," Tom finished, "until it didn't." He pulled out some tools from his kit. "Well, we humans learned a long time ago that everything breaks eventually. That's why we build things, so they can be fixed." Over the next few hours, the human team began their assessment. The aliens watched in what seemed like horror as Tom and his engineers started planning where they would need to cut into the pristine walls to install manual bypass systems. "You want to cut into the ship?" Bright asked, his translator struggling to convey his distress. "We need access points," Tom explained patiently. "Ways to reroute power and replace damaged components. Your ship is beautiful, but right now we need it to be functional more than beautiful." Kate noticed some of the younger alien engineers watching with growing interest as the humans worked. Unlike their superiors, they seemed fascinated by the direct, hands-on approach to problem-solving. "Your methods are unorthodox," Captain Reed observed from his shielded position. "That's one way to put it," Marcus replied, setting up radiation shielding around their work area. "But sometimes unorthodox is exactly what you need." As the first work shift drew to a close, Tom could see the aliens beginning to understand. They weren't just getting a repair job. They were getting a lesson in human ingenuity. Sometimes, the most elegant solution wasn't the most practical one. And right now, practical solutions were exactly what they needed. After 3 days of non-stop work, Tom Baker stood in the alien engine room staring at the damaged quantum drive system. Sweat dripped down his face inside his radiation suit as he studied the complex network of crystalline structures that powered the massive ship. The problem was worse than they had initially thought. "It's not just radiation damage," he explained to Captain Reed, who watched from behind his protective barrier. "The solar flare did something to the quantum fields themselves. They're twisted somehow." Marcus walked up, his radiation meter beeping steadily. "Like a knot in space-time," he added. "Their fancy quantum technology tried to compensate and ended up making things worse." The alien engineers had gathered around their chief, Bright, all watching the humans with a mixture of hope and skepticism. One of them stepped forward, holding up a holographic display. "We've run over 10,000 simulations," the engineer said. "The quantum fields need to be perfectly realigned, but the radiation makes it impossible to maintain the precision required. Our technology simply cannot function in these conditions." Tom walked over to a makeshift workbench they'd set up, picking up a piece of equipment they'd brought from Earth. It looked primitive compared to the alien technology, all metal and plastic with visible screws and wires. "Your solution is too perfect," he said, turning the device over in his hands. "You're trying to fix everything at once, make it all perfect again. But sometimes you need to break a problem down into smaller pieces." Captain Reed moved closer to his shielded observation area. "What are you suggesting?" Tom placed the device on a nearby console. "We can't fix your quantum drive all at once. But what if we don't have to? What if we build a series of smaller, simpler systems that can temporarily handle parts of what your main drive does?" The alien engineers began talking among themselves rapidly. Bright stepped forward, his expression concerned. That's impossible," he said. "The quantum fields must work in perfect harmony. You can't just break them into pieces." "Actually, we can," Marcus interrupted, pulling up some readings on his tablet. "Look at these radiation patterns. They're not uniform. Some areas of the ship are less affected than others. We could set up radiation-hardened control systems in those spots." Kate, who had been quietly observing the alien crew's reactions, added her thoughts. "It's like when a human body is injured. Sometimes you can't heal everything at once. You stabilize the critical systems first, then work on full recovery." Tom nodded. "Exactly. We build a temporary system using our radiation-hardened technology. It won't be as efficient as your quantum drive, but it'll be strong enough to get you to a safe repair facility." "But the power requirements," one of the alien engineers began. "Will be handled by good old-fashioned nuclear power," Tom finished. "We brought some compact reactors with us. Not as elegant as your quantum systems, but they'll run just fine in this radiation." Captain Reed was silent for a long moment. Tom could almost see him weighing the options. The alien captain had already watched several backup systems fail completely. Now he was being asked to trust his ship and his people to what must seem like incredibly primitive technology. Finally, Reed spoke. "How long would this temporary solution take to implement?" Tom looked at his team, doing quick calculations in his head. 4 days to set up the basic systems, another 2 to test and calibrate everything. After that, you'd be able to move the fleet to safer space. "And you're certain this will work?" Reed asked. Tom met the captain's gaze directly. "Captain, humanity learned a long time ago that backup systems don't need to be perfect. They just need to work when everything else fails. This solution isn't pretty, but it will get your people to safety." There was another long pause. Then Reed turned to his engineering team. "Begin preparations to implement the human solution." As the alien crew began moving with new purpose, Tom caught Kate's eye. She smiled behind her faceplate. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "primitive is exactly what you need." The engine room had changed dramatically over the past 4 days. What was once a pristine chamber of crystalline technology now looked like a hybrid of alien and human engineering. Thick cables snaked across the floor, connecting to radiation-hardened control panels mounted on the walls. The gentle hum of the quantum systems was now accompanied by the steady thrum of human nuclear power units. Tom wiped his sleeve across his helmet visor as he finished connecting another set of cables. The work was exhausting, but they were making progress. Beside him, one of the younger alien engineers watched with growing interest. "I don't understand," the alien said, gesturing at the complex network of cables and machinery. "Your technology is so physical, yet it works in conditions that disable our advanced systems." Marcus looked up from his radiation readings. "Sometimes the simplest solution is the most reliable. Look at this cable. It's just copper wrapped in specialized insulation. Nothing fancy, but it'll keep working even if the radiation fries everything else. The alien engineers had slowly warmed to the human methods over the past few days. What they initially saw as crude was starting to look ingenious. They were particularly fascinated by the concept of redundant systems, the human habit of building backups for their backups. Kate worked nearby, monitoring both the human team's radiation exposure and the alien crew's reactions to their work. "It's like watching two different engineering philosophies collide," she commented to Tom. "Their way is to make something perfect that never needs fixing. Our way is to make something tough that can be fixed when it breaks." A sudden alarm blared through the ship. Captain Reed's voice came over the communication system. "Engineering team, we're detecting power fluctuations in the temporary systems. What's happening?" Tom rushed to the main control panel they'd installed. The readings showed a cascade of small failures in the hybrid system. The integration between human and alien technology was becoming unstable. "The quantum fields are fighting against our power regulation," he explained. "It's like they're trying to revert to their original state." Bright moved closer to his shielded observation post. "This is what we feared. The quantum systems cannot operate in this compromised state." But Tom was already moving, his mind racing through possible solutions. He'd seen something similar during his years working on experimental fusion reactors back on Earth. "Marcus," he called out, "remember that containment trick we used in the Tokyo reactor? The one with the oscillating magnetic fields?" Marcus's eyes lit up behind his visor. "You want to create a buffer zone? That's crazy, but it might work." The two men began working frantically, reprogramming their control systems. Instead of trying to force the quantum fields to accept the human power supply directly, they created a fluctuating barrier between the two technologies. "Think of it like a translator," Tom explained to the bewildered alien crew. "Instead of our systems fighting with yours, they'll talk to each other through this buffer zone." Kate watched the readings carefully. The radiation levels in the buffer zone are actually dropping. The quantum fields are starting to stabilize. Over the next hour, they refined the solution. The human nuclear power fed into the buffer system, which then converted the energy into something the alien quantum drive could accept. It wasn't perfect, but it was working. Captain Reed's voice came over the comm again. "Engineering, the power readings are stabilizing across all systems. What did you do?" "We stopped trying to make our technology perfect," Tom replied, checking the final readings. "Instead, we made it adaptable." The alien engineers gathered around their displays, watching in amazement as the hybrid system continued to function. One by one, the ship's critical systems began coming back online. "It's not elegant," Bright admitted, "but it's remarkable. You've created harmony between technologies that should never have been able to work together." Tom smiled behind his helmet. "That's another human specialty. We're good at making things work together, even when they're not perfect matches. Sometimes the best solutions come from combining different approaches." As the engine room settled into a steady working rhythm, the sounds of human and alien technology mixing together, Tom couldn't help but feel proud. They'd done more than just fix a broken ship. They'd proven that humanity's practical approach to problems had value, even in a galaxy of advanced technology. Sometimes the best way forward wasn't the most advanced path, but the most practical one. The warning came without any notice. Marcus was the first to spot it on his radiation monitors. A massive surge in solar activity heading straight for the fleet. "Solar flare," he shouted, his voice cutting through the steady hum of machinery. "Bigger than the first one. Impact in 15 minutes." The engine room erupted into activity. The alien crew rushed to their monitoring stations while Tom and his team scrambled to protect their hybrid systems. "Captain Reed," Tom called over the comm, "we need to power up the emergency shields now. The hybrid system isn't ready for this kind of radiation." Reed's voice crackled back, tense but controlled. "All ships are reporting their shields are already at maximum capacity. Will it be enough?" Marcus checked his readings again, his face grim behind his helmet visor. "No, these radiation levels, They're off the charts. The alien shields won't hold. Kate rushed to the main control panel, bringing up the fleet's status display. We've got 50,000 civilians spread across 30 ships. If those shields fail, Tom made a quick decision. We need to redirect power from our nuclear units to strengthen their shields. It's the only way. That would mean shutting down the hybrid dry system, Bright protested from his protected area. We'd be completely stranded. Better stranded than dead, Tom replied, already moving to the main power distribution panel. Marcus, help me reconfigure these connections. Kate, coordinate with the other ships. They need to modify their shield generators to accept our power feed. The next 10 minutes were a blur of desperate activity. Human and alien crews worked together, racing against time. Tom's hands flew over the controls, rerouting power systems that were never meant to work together. 5 minutes to impact, Marcus called out. The first wave of radiation hit them early, just a taste of what was coming. Warning alarms blared across the fleet as shield systems struggled to compensate. The modifications aren't holding on ships 7 through 12, Kate reported, her voice tense. Their shields are starting to fail. Tom looked at the power readings. They needed more. Without thinking, he began disconnecting safety limiters from the nuclear-powered units. "What are you doing?" Bright asked, alarm evident in his voice. "Those limiters are essential. They're also holding us back," Tom replied, sweat dripping inside his suit. "Marcus, Kate, get to the backup control room. I need to stay here to manually regulate the power flow." "That's suicide," Marcus protested. "The radiation levels in here will be lethal without those safety systems." "My suit can handle it for a few minutes," Tom said, though he knew it was a lie. "That's all I need. Now go." As his teammates reluctantly left, Tom turned to the alien crew. "You two, get to safety. I'll handle this." The radiation levels were climbing rapidly now. Tom could hear his suit's Geiger counter screaming warnings, but he kept working. His hands moved across the controls, pushing the nuclear reactors far beyond their designed limits. 2 minutes to impact. Tom felt the radiation beginning to seep through his suit. His skin tingled, then burned. But the power readings were climbing. Across the fleet, shield systems began to stabilize as they received the extra energy they desperately needed. 1 minute. His vision was starting to blur. The radiation was worse than anything he'd ever experienced, but he could see on the monitors that the shields were holding. They just needed to survive the initial blast. Impact in 10, 9. Tom's legs buckled, but he held onto the control panel, keeping the power flow steady. His radiation badge had turned black, never a good sign. 5, 4. The room filled with blinding light as the solar flare struck. Tom closed his eyes, continuing to adjust the controls by memory alone. 3, 2, 1. The world went white. But across the fleet, 50,000 lives hung in the balance, protected by human ingenuity and one engineer's sacrifice. The shields had to hold. They had to. The medical bay of the alien flagship was unusually crowded. 3 days had passed since the solar flare, and Tom Baker was finally waking up. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the soft blue light. The first thing he saw was Kate's relieved smile. "Welcome back," she said softly. "You had us worried there for a while." Tom tried to sit up but found his body surprisingly heavy. "The fleet, did we? Everyone survived." Marcus cut in from the other side of his bed. "All 50,000. The shields held." Tom relaxed slightly, letting the news sink in. That's when he noticed the alien medical staff watching him with what could only be described as amazement. Captain Reed stood among them, along with Chief Engineer Bright. "Your radiation exposure was nearly 4 times the lethal level for our species," Reed said, stepping forward. "Yet here you are, recovering. Your cellular repair capabilities are remarkable." "Human stubbornness," Tom managed a weak smile. "We don't like giving up." "The Galactic Council has reviewed the events," Reed continued. They're reconsidering their position on primitive species. Your solution to our crisis has been documented and will be implemented as standard emergency protocol across all fleets. Bright moved closer, holding what looked like a modified version of their shield generator. We've already begun incorporating your backup system designs into our ships. Simple, physical controls that can work even when our quantum systems fail. The Council called it a breakthrough in practical engineering. More importantly, Kate added, they've offered humanity a provisional membership in the galactic community. They want to learn from us as much as we want to learn from them. Tom looked around the medical bay, seeing the mixture of human and alien technology working together. His near sacrifice had done more than save lives. It had bridged the gap between two very different approaches to solving problems. The Council wants you to speak at their next assembly, Marcus said with a grin. Something about the importance of maintaining practical skills in an advanced civilization. They've also requested that human engineers be assigned to all major fleet operations. Reed added, your ability to think differently, to find solutions in crisis. It's a valuable asset we hadn't recognized before. A young alien engineer who had worked closely with them during a crisis stepped forward. We always thought advancement meant making things more perfect, more automated. We forgot the importance of being able to fix things when they break. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways, Tom said, finally managing to sit up. Not because they're perfect, but because they work when everything else fails. The medical bay's door opened, and a group of council representatives entered. They carried with them an official document, humanity's invitation to join the galactic community. We've learned something important from you humans, the lead council member said. True advancement isn't just about creating perfect systems. It's about being adaptable, resourceful, and brave enough to risk everything to save others. Tom looked at his teammates, then at the alien crew they'd worked with. What had started as an emergency rescue had become something much more, a lesson in combining the best of both worlds. So, Marcus said with a smile, ready to teach some advanced aliens how to be a little more primitive. Tom laughed, feeling stronger by the minute. I prefer to think of it as teaching them to be practical. After all, that's what humans do best. We find ways to make things work. As he looked out the medical bay window at the fleet of ships now bearing the marks of human engineering, Tom knew this was just the beginning. Humanity had proven its worth not through advanced technology, but through the very qualities that some had considered primitive: resourcefulness, determination, and the ability to keep working even when things seemed impossible. In the end, it wasn't about being advanced or primitive. It was about finding solutions, saving lives, and bringing different worlds together. That was humanity's real gift to the galaxy. And now, thanks to one damaged fleet and a team of determined humans, the entire galaxy would learn to appreciate the value of keeping things simple, practical, and fixable. After all, sometimes the best solutions are the most human ones.